G'day, it's Pete here, and today I wanted to talk about tips for playing your first competitive bridge. So I wanted to look at playing your first duplicate, or playing your first congress, like day-long congress, or playing your first national competition. And I wanted to go over what to expect, what to bring, basically how you should actually prepare yourself for playing these different events. So anyway, let's jump straight in and look at playing your first duplicate bridge. Now, I just wanted to mention, this is probably the biggest leap in levels that you'll actually make during any of your competitive bridge, like as you're ascending up. This is probably the biggest between playing supervised bridge and playing your first duplicate. After this, it becomes a lot easier. But the first thing that you'll actually notice playing your first duplicate bridge is there's time pressure. So when you're playing supervised or just casually, you've got all the time in the world. You can take as long as you want. When you're playing duplicate bridge, usually you're limited to 7 minutes a hand. Now this does mean that you could use 10 minutes on one hand and then 4 on the next, but usually you want to stay around this time, and you'll feel this pressure. But what you'll notice is after playing these for a few times, you'll just naturally get in tune with this time, and that's okay. But what I would actually recommend is, at your local bridge club, ask if they've got any mentors for you and your partner, so that the very first time that you can actually play one of these, you play with a mentor and your partner plays with a mentor, just so you can get used to this time pressure and it's not so daunting. Lots of different bridge clubs would be able to help you out with this. And then after that first time you've got a bit more comfortable, then you can go back to playing with your regular partner, and that's all good. Another thing that I would recommend is sitting east-west for your very first duplicate. And this is because north-south has a lot more to do with the scoring and maybe board movements, whereas east-west basically go to a table and all you have to do is work out which table do I go to next, and just make sure you check the score. So sitting east-west is a really good way to be able to introduce yourself into playing duplicate bridge, because there's less things that you have to do that you already have to know about first. You just get told where to go, and you have to check what other people have done is actually okay. But when you're playing your first duplicate, I really recommend make sure you introduce yourself and get to know the community. The best thing I find about playing bridge is developing the sense of community, knowing your other players, meeting friends. So this all starts with introducing yourselves and starting to talk to them. I can't stress this enough. You don't just want to play bridge and then leave. See if you can find a group of people that you can discuss the hands with afterwards. Make sure that whenever you play a set of hands, that you actually discuss them afterwards and learn from them, get some feedback. So this means getting a group, not necessarily just you and your partner, but people that you can actually discuss the boards with. If it is just you and your partner, that's okay. Make sure you go over the hands afterwards, but be increasing your group where you can get more varied ideas, and discussing things is really good. So if you can, at your local club, find a few other fellow players that are interested in actually doing this after a session of bridge. The final thing about moving into duplicate bridge is you'll find that people actually will start doubling you more. If you're playing just social bridge or supervised bridge, people don't double you when you get to your silly contracts, whereas in duplicate bridge, this is competition. They're going to try and maximize their score. So you'll notice that you get doubled more. That's okay. But just be aware that if you keep overbidding, you'll find that you start getting doubled. So there are a few of my tips for duplicate bridge. So first of all, you'll notice time pressure, and to avoid this, basically just ask for a mentor for you and your partner, so that the very first time you play, you get a sense of what's in store, and you'll naturally progress to being able to play at this. There's no real penalties for going overtime too much. Basically, you just get hurried along by the director. So you don't need to worry too much about it. You just want to be aware that it exists. If you haven't done the scoring, make sure you try and sit east-west. Also introduce yourself and try and get a group where you can discuss the hands afterwards, because the sense of community is really, really what it's about. And then finally, people will double you more, and this is the biggest leap that you're going to be making between where you are and moving up the ranks into the more competitive levels. So the second area I wanted to discuss about is playing day-long congresses. So this is where you might play a whole day of bridge. So for this, what I'd actually recommend is getting there early. Most of these congresses are at various different locations, so you'll have to travel around your city or state or to find these places. So make sure you give yourself plenty of time to get there early, because it's going to be an unfamiliar area most of the time. Also, wear layers. This is really important for not only this one, but playing national levels. But wearing layers, because when you're going to a new club, you don't know if it's going to be hot or cold. So you want to wear something that you can either take off or put on. It's really simple, but you want to be comfortable. Make sure that you wear, bring something extra, even if you think it's pretty warm, because maybe the air conditioning's pumped up. But you want to be able to adjust it, basically, is the main thing. Also, for some of these, lunch is provided, some it's not. It's important to know. You might want to just bring your own lunch if it's not. So usually they'll tell you at the start if lunch is provided. So just check that before you go. And at these congresses, you'll find out that the director gets called a lot more than at duplicate level. And this is completely okay. You don't need to feel worried that the director's being called. You're not being accused of cheating or anything like that when the director's called, even if some people call director really aggressively. Don't worry about it, but just be aware that the director's called more often, and that's completely okay. Also, if you feel like you've got some questions, don't feel afraid to call the director. It is completely normal to call it. It is not an insult to your opponents. You shouldn't feel insulted if the director's being called. It is completely normal. So just, it happens. You want to be aware of it, but there's nothing bad that comes of it. So you just want to know. Also, for day-long congresses, these are events that you have to pre-register for. So duplicate bridge, you can usually just rock up, put your name down on a list, and go from there. Whereas day-long congresses, you usually have to enroll beforehand. So make sure you do that rather than just showing up to actually do it. One of the things about the scoring in day-long congresses is it's usually Swiss pairs or Swiss teams. So what this actually means is they get the top half of the field and the bottom half of the field, and then they match them up for the very first round. This means if it's your first match, you are probably going to play very tough opponents and get beaten up most of the time. Every now and then, you will beat them, and that'll be a fantastic story. But a lot of the time, you'll play a really tough opponent in your very first match and get beaten up. This happens to a lot of the field, so don't get disheartened when you lose your first match if you do. But you should be really happy if you win those ones. And then it starts pairing you with people that are doing equally well from there on in. So the first match is usually really, really difficult, and you'll be playing against a more experienced pair or team to start off with, which usually involves you losing and then playing against other people of your rank. So this happens a lot. It's just something with the format of the scoring. It's not something I particularly like, but it's how it actually lines up. So don't worry if you lose your very first match heavily, because that's just going to happen to most of the inexperienced half of the field who is being paired up against the top half. So that's going to happen, but basically you shouldn't worry about it. It should be a challenge for you. Every now and then you are going to be beating these pairs. Like, they might beat you 3 out of 4 times, but you should rejoice every time you beat them up. And having the opportunity to play against them means you get to meet them, discuss hands with them. Make sure that after the session you go up and talk to them, ask them questions. What could you have done better? You don't often get that opportunity, so you get to play against a better pair. Then you should use that time afterwards during a break to actually go up to them and ask them some questions. The final thing I wanted to mention is don't get starstruck. You might have heard some players' names, and you might then go up and play against them in one of these fields. Don't worry that they might be really good at bridge. All of them bleed. Like, everyone makes mistakes. They probably make fewer mistakes, but they do make mistakes, and you have an opportunity to try and beat them. Don't worry that you're playing against some top player that is out of your league. You want to go in there and try and beat them if you can, and at the very least try and learn from them and ask questions. Don't try and change your gameplay because you're worried that you're playing against some really good player. I get the biggest edge when people are afraid to double me because of who I am, which now means I can just bid whatever I want and not get doubled. So you really want to make sure that you don't change your game plan. You still want to be aggressive. You still want to double them if you think they're overbidding. Yeah, they will beat you more often. They will defend correctly. But if you give up your winning game strategy, then you've already lost. So make sure you don't change your plan. So just a quick recap of the things I wanted to talk about for day-long congresses. Get there early. You're in an unfamiliar area. You want to wear layers so that you can change your clothing so that you're actually comfortable. You want to find out if lunch is provided. The director does get called more often. This is something you need to pre-register for. And the first match is often very difficult because it inexperienced pairs against the top half of the field, and then after that you start playing people who are doing equally well as you. So that's all I recommend for playing your first day-long congress. And then after that, let's look at playing your first national competition. So this has quite a few of the same recommendations as playing your first congress. What I would recommend is bring layers and pre-register. These are things that you really need to do. One other thing you'll find out is you'll get tired from playing so much. You might have noticed this in earlier levels. The first time you play a duplicate, you're like, wow, I played 27 boards. That tired me out. How do people do this without faltering? And then you move into day-long congress and you're really exhausted after a day. And then when you get into nationals and you're playing multiple days, then you're getting particularly tired. What I find is that the first time you go to each of these levels, you're going to get tired from playing more bridge than you're used to playing. But what you find out is after you've played your first duplicate and you go back and just play like 8 hands of bridge, you don't get tired doing that. When you move to your day-long congress, play a whole day's bridge, yes, you get tired then, but if you go back and play a duplicate, 27 boards is really easy now because you've experienced and you've pushed yourself, so you don't get tired then. When you play 2 days of bridge, you're going to get tired on the second day of bridge, but if you go back and just play a day-long competition, you're fine for that whole day. So basically, you're going to get tired. It's going to be exhausting by the end of it, the very first time. But you want to try and stretch yourself, and maybe you play a 2-day competition, then try and do a 5-day competition, then try and do a week-long competition. And when you go back and play those shorter forms of competition, you'll find that you're completely okay for those. So the very first time you stretch yourself and try and play more bridge day after day or more in a day, you'll find that you do get tired, but it makes your stamina better for the shorter events. So you want to stretch yourself, and it's really important to go to these nationals so that you're better for day-long congresses, or go to a day-long congress so you're better for a duplicate. So you will get tired. There's not much you can do about it. Just try and get rest and allow lots of time after the national. For me, like when I play really long events, it takes me a couple of days to recover. So don't try and do too much afterwards. Just have a relaxing time after. Don't just go, okay, it's done, I'm back to work, I'm going to work a full day, because then you'll be really exhausted. Maybe finish at the national, give yourself a day, then go from there. There are also different nationals. You can play for a weekend, you can play for 3 days, 5 days. Find one that suits the level, the amount of bridge that you actually want to try and play. So find one that actually works for you. Then also what you want to do is bring a pen. I haven't mentioned this before, but bringing a pen to a day-long congress or a duplicate or your first national, this is really important. The reason you want to bring a pen, often they're provided. But if you're anything like me, you are going to lose your pen the first time you move tables. So I like a backup. So bring a pen, because you'll usually need a pen for either writing the score down or writing the bidding if you're using written bidding. And then the best thing about nationals, which I mentioned for the duplicates, but this is on a whole new level, is Meet the people, introduce yourself. There's usually socializing. Find a cafe where people go for breakfast, or a bar where people have drinks at night and talk about the hands. And just go and meet a group of people where you can discuss hands. You go for lunch with them. Find a group of people that are like-minded and talk with them, discuss the hands. And this is the best thing about Nationals, is meeting the different people. Don't just go there, play and leave. Make sure you hang around and talk with people, introduce yourself. It is the absolutely best thing I find about National Bridge, is the socializing that comes with it. And most of them are really welcoming to new people that come up and just introduce themselves and want to talk and play bridge and have a good time. And final thing I wanted to mention is lots of Nationals have talks, like teacher programs where they talk on certain topics. So if you're new, try and attend these. You can often learn quite a bit for quite a cheap session. It might be between $1 or $5. I don't know. It really depends on the Nationals. But you can usually go in and learn on a different topic from an expert player. So this is something Nationals often provide. Not all of them do, but a lot of them do. So if they do, find out about them and try and attend. So quick recap of what we wanted to do for your first National is bring layers, pre-register. Notice that you will get tired from playing these events. Work out how many days you do actually want to play. Maybe you want to play a two-day event, your first National, then maybe move on to 5 days, and then do the week-long ones. Bring a pen. This is good for duplicates, day-long congresses, and Nationals, because you'll often forget, like either lose a pen, or they do provide them, but I often lose so many pens it's not funny. And meet the people and attend the talks. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this tips on playing your first competitive bridge, and I'll see you next time.